Elder Thys stood on the observation deck of the council hall, watching the twin suns set over the golden wheat fields of Kepler 442c. The sight had always brought him peace. Today it felt like looking at a grave. The communication device in his hand crackled with static. The message had arrived 3 hours ago, and he had read it 20 times. Each reading made it feel more real and more impossible at the same time. The Galactic Cooperative regrets to inform you that Fleet Command has decided to withdraw all military assets from the Outer Rim sectors. Due to the escalating HFY War, we cannot spare ships to defend worlds beyond the core systems. We recommend immediate evacuation of all civilians to designated safe zones. This transmission is classified under Emergency Protocol 7. Good luck. Good luck. As if luck would stop the Krex war machine. Thys looked down at his hands. They were covered in soft gray fur, designed for holding farming tools and nurturing young plants. The Zilani had evolved on this peaceful world over millions of years. They had never needed claws or fangs or weapons. Their greatest achievement was learning to make the desert bloom with life. Now that peaceful evolution would be their doom. Behind him, the council chamber filled with worried voices. 30 elders, gathered around the great circular table, their ear tufts twitching with anxiety. Some were already crying. Others sat in stunned silence. "We must contact the other worlds," said Elder Ven, her voice shaking. "Surely someone will help us. The humans have ships. The Altarians have weapons." "The humans are fighting on the front lines," Thys replied quietly. "Their entire fleet is engaged with the main Krex force near the galactic core. The Altarians fell back to defend their home system weeks ago." "Then what do we do?" The question came from Elder Moss, the youngest member of the council. He was barely 200 years old, still considered a child by Zilani standards. Thys turned away from the window. In the distance, he could see the great biocities that the Zilani had grown over centuries. Tall spires of living wood rose from the plains, connected by bridges made of woven vines. Gardens cascaded down their sides, feeding the population with fresh fruits and vegetables. No weapons, no armor, no defenses. "We prepare for the worst," Thys said. "Send word to all settlements. Evacuate the young ones to the deep shelters. Adults will remain to maintain essential systems." "You mean we wait here to die?" Elder Ven said bitterly. "We do what we must to save the children." The Krex would arrive in 3 days. Their intelligence reports painted a horrifying picture. The Krex Empire conquered worlds not for resources or territory, but for the joy of domination. They were evolved predators, pack hunters who saw all other species as prey. Captured populations became slaves at best, food at worst. The Zilani had no military traditions. Their police force carried stun rods for breaking up arguments about farming rights. Their orbital stations were civilian research posts with no weapons. When the Krex arrived, it would be like wolves attacking a herd of sheep. Over the next 2 days, the great evacuation began. Zilani families said tearful goodbyes as parents sent their children deep underground. The emergency shelters had been built during the early days of galactic expansion, designed to protect against natural disasters. Now they would hide the future of the Zilani species. Thys watched young Kira, his own granddaughter, disappear into the shelter entrance. She was only 50 years old, her fur still soft and bright. She looked back at him with wide, trusting eyes. "Will you come with us, grandfather?" "Soon," he lied. "I have work to finish first." As the shelter sealed shut, Thys felt a piece of his heart die. He would never see her again. None of the adults would survive what was coming. The first sign of the Krex fleet appeared on the 3rd day. Long-range sensors detected the hyperspace distortions hours before the ships arrived. Thys stood in the emergency command center with the few military advisors the Zilani possessed. They were not soldiers, just scientists who had studied warfare as an academic subject. 12 heavy cruisers, reported Commander Hess reading from the displays. 8 troop carriers. 4 planetary bombardment ships. "How many soldiers?" Thys asked. "At least 50,000. Perhaps more. 50,000 trained killers against a population that had never held a weapon." The math was simple and terrible. The Krek ships dropped out of hyperspace like hungry vultures. They were ugly vessels, all sharp angles and armor plating. Gun ports dotted their hulls like the spots on a predator's coat. They took positions around the planet with practiced efficiency. For 1 hour, nothing happened. The Kreks were studying their prey, planning their attack. Then the sky began to burn. The first bombardment struck the outer settlements, not enough to destroy them completely, but enough to spread terror. Farms exploded in balls of fire. Transport ships fleeing the surface were vaporized by precise energy beams. The message was clear. There would be no escape. Thys received panicked reports from across the planet. Krek's dropships were landing in the major cities. The invaders poured out like a flood of death, their reptilian forms covered in battle armor. They moved with the coordinated precision of born hunters. The few Zilani who tried to fight were cut down instantly. Farming tools were no match for military weapons. Energy bolts tore through the biocities, setting the living wood ablaze. Screams echoed across the communication channels. "Sir," Commander Hess said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead Krek ship." The main screen flickered to life, showing a massive reptilian face. The creature's eyes were like chips of yellow ice, and its mouth was full of sharp teeth. Sharp, battle scars covered its scaled hide. "I am General Vax of the Krek's Fifth Fleet," the alien said in perfect galactic standard. "Your world now belongs to the Empire. Surrender immediately, and some of you may live as slaves. Resist, and we will hunt down every last member of your pathetic species." The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, Thys could hear his own heartbeat. "What are your orders, Elder?" Commander Hess asked. Thys closed his eyes. In his mind, he could see Kira's face, trusting and innocent. He thought of all, the children hiding in the deep shelters waiting for their parents to save them. He thought of the millions of Zilani who had lived and died on this peaceful world, never knowing violence or hatred. "Send a message to any galactic cooperative forces that might be listening," he said. "Tell them what is happening here. Tell them we tried to be brave. And the surrender? No." The word came out stronger than Thys had expected. "We will not surrender. If we must die, we die as free beings." Over the next hours, the situation grew worse. Krek's forces seized the spaceports and communication arrays. They rounded up captured Zilani like livestock, loading them onto transport ships. The lucky ones were shot while trying to run. General Vax established his headquarters in the capital city's tallest biospire. From there, he broadcast a message to any listening cooperative forces. Approach this world and every native would die in agony. As night fell on the second day of occupation, Elder Thys sat alone in the ruins of the council chamber. Half the building had been destroyed in the initial attack. Bodies of his fellow elders lay scattered among the broken furniture. He activated his personal communicator one last time. Perhaps some ship in deep space would hear his words. Perhaps someone would remember the Zilani when they were gone. "This is Elder Thys of Kepler 442c, he said into the device. "We believed no one would fight for us. We were right. The galaxy has abandoned us to die. If anyone receives this message, know that we existed. Know that we loved our children and our world. Know that we deserved better." He set down the communicator and waited for death to find him. General Vax stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Blood Talon, and felt satisfaction flow through his reptilian body like warm sunlight. Below him, the planet Kepler 442c spun slowly in space, its surface dotted with fires where his forces had struck. Perfect. The conquest had been even easier than expected. His intelligence reports had described the Zilani as pacifists, but Vax had not believed any species could be so completely helpless. In 40 years of military service, he had never seen a population offer so little resistance. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority that had conquered 17 worlds. Major Krell, his second-in-command, checked the tactical displays. "All major population centers are under our control. Resistance has been eliminated. We have captured approximately 2 million natives. Casualties? 43 Kreks wounded. 7 dead." Vax's teeth showed in what other species might mistake for a smile. 7 dead out of 50,000 soldiers. The Zilani had not even managed to mount a proper defense. Their police force had fired a few stun weapons before being crushed. Their civilian leaders had hidden in government buildings until smoke drove them out. It was almost disappointing. The Kreks had evolved from pack hunters on a harsh desert world. Every aspect of their society revolved around strength, dominance, and the conquest of prey. They understood the universe in simple terms: the strong ruled, the weak served. Natural law demanded it, but even by Krek standards, this had been a slaughter rather than a proper hunt. "Begin processing the captives," Vax ordered. "Sort them by age and physical condition. The young ones will adapt better to slavery. The old and weak can be used for target practice." "Yes, General. What about the ones still hiding underground?" Vax had read the reports about emergency shelters scattered across the planet. Mostly children, according to their intelligence. Hidden away like frightened prey animals. Let them stay down there for now, he decided. Fear will weaken them. When we finally dig them out, they will be grateful just to see sunlight again. Grateful slaves work harder. The main screen showed feeds from across the planet. In the capital city, Krek's soldiers herded groups of captured Zilani through the streets. The aliens were tall and graceful, with soft gray fur and large eyes that showed too much emotion. They moved like deer, all nervous energy and fragile elegance. Pathetic. In the processing centers, captured Zilani were being sorted into groups. The strong ones would be shipped to mining worlds where their plant-growing abilities might prove useful. The weak ones would be used for entertainment in the arena worlds. Children would be raised as house servants. It was efficient, clean, the way conquest should be. Vax turned his attention to the tactical situation. His fleet held complete control of the system. The Galactic Cooperative had abandoned this sector, pulling their forces back to defend more important worlds. Standard procedure for prey species. When faced with real predators, they ran. The humans had surprised him during the early stages of the war. Intelligence reports suggested they actually enjoyed fighting, which was unusual for cooperative species. But they were tied up defending their own colonies now. Even if they wanted to interfere here, they lacked the ships to do it. "Sir," Communications Officer Yat reported, "we are receiving a transmission from High Command." The screen flickered, showing the scarred face of Fleet Admiral Drac. The old Krex was a legend, having personally conquered more worlds than any general in history. Report: "General Vax, Kepler 442c is secured, Admiral. Minimal resistance. The population is being processed according to standard protocols." "Excellent. How long until you can move on to the next target?" Vax checked his displays. 3 days to complete processing. Another day to load the transports. We can be ready to move on Altair 7 by the end of the week." "Good. Intelligence suggests the cooperative may attempt to reclaim some outer rim territories. I want this sector locked down before they can organize a counterattack." The transmission ended. Vax felt his confidence grow. The Hegemony War was proceeding exactly as planned. Within 6 months, the entire Outer Rim would belong to the Krex Empire. Within a year, they would be striking at the core worlds themselves. On the planet below, the occupation continued smoothly. Krex soldiers had established checkpoints at every major intersection. Captured Zilani were being transported to holding facilities in the larger cities. Any sign of resistance was crushed immediately. Captain Zess reported from the surface. "We found their government leaders hiding in an underground bunker. Most surrendered immediately. A few tried to run, and they are no longer running." Vax nodded approvingly. The Krex way of war was simple and effective. Show overwhelming force, crush resistance before it could spread, make the cost of defiance so terrible that survivors would choose slavery over death. It had worked on every world they had conquered. The bio-cities burned slowly, their living wood crackling as energy weapons set them ablaze. Smoke rose into the clear sky like funeral pyres. The Zilani had spent centuries growing those structures, nurturing them like children. Now they were ash and memory. Major Krell approached with another report. "General, we have established communication intercept stations. Any signals leaving the planet will be monitored and blocked." "What about distress calls? Did they manage to send any messages before we arrived?" "Several automated distress beacons. Standard cooperative emergency protocols. Nothing that would bring immediate help." "Good." The last thing Vax wanted was some foolish cooperative captain attempting a rescue mission. Not that it would succeed. His fleet could destroy any small force that might respond. But unnecessary battles meant unnecessary casualties, and High Command preferred efficient conquests. As the day progressed, reports continued to flow in. The Kreks had found stockpiles of food in the bio-cities, enough to feed their forces for months. They had captured several Zilani scientists whose knowledge of agricultural techniques might prove valuable. The orbital stations yielded useful intelligence about cooperative fleet movements. Everything was proceeding perfectly. On the second day, Vax decided to inspect the surface personally. His shuttle landed in the capital city's central plaza, where a temporary command post had been established. Krek soldiers snapped to attention as he emerged. The plaza had once been a garden filled with flowering plants and peaceful sculptures. Now it was a staging area for military equipment. Armored vehicles lined the streets. Guard towers had been erected at key positions. The smell of smoke drifted on the wind. Captain Zess met him at the landing pad. "Welcome to the surface, General. Would you like a full tour? Show me the processing centers first." They walked through streets lined with damaged buildings. Here and there, Vax saw groups of captured Zilani being marched under guard. The aliens kept their heads down, their large eyes filled with defeat. The main processing center had been set up in what was once a cultural hall. Inside, hundreds of Zilani sat in organized rows while Krek soldiers sorted them by various criteria. The strong ones were marked for heavy labor, the intelligent ones for technical work, the young ones for domestic service. "How many total captives?" Vax asked. "Just over 2 million confirmed. Perhaps another million hiding in the underground shelters." Vax studied the nearest group of prisoners. They sat quietly, some comforting frightened children, others staring into space with empty expressions. No anger, no hatred, no plans for revenge, just broken spirits waiting for whatever fate their conquerors chose. It was exactly what he expected from prey species. "Any problems with the locals?" "None, sir. A few tried to fight with farming tools during the initial assault. They learned quickly that resistance was futile." As they toured the facility, Vax felt the familiar satisfaction of a successful hunt. The Kreks had evolved this feeling over millions of years of evolution. The moment when prey finally submitted completely, when the struggle ended and natural order was restored. That evening, Vax stood in his temporary office overlooking the conquered city. Lights twinkled in the darkness where his forces maintained their positions. Everything was quiet, peaceful, orderly. He activated the communication system and composed a message to any cooperative forces that might be monitoring local space. "This is General Vax of the Krek's Fifth Fleet. The world-designated Kepler 442c now belongs to the Krek's Empire. The native population is under our protection. Any attempt to reclaim this territory will result in the immediate execution of all prisoners. This sector is closed to cooperative vessels. Approach at your own risk." The message would be broadcast on all frequencies. Any ship within 50 light-years would receive it. The warning was clear: this world was lost. "Move on." Vax settled back in his chair and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Another world conquered, another step toward the ultimate victory of the Krek's Empire, another proof that strength would always triumph over weakness. In the distance, he could hear the sound of construction as his engineers built permanent installations. Guard towers, communication arrays, processing facilities. All the infrastructure needed to turn a free world into a slave colony. It was the sound of progress. The sound of natural law asserting itself across the galaxy. The sound of prey learning their proper place in the universe. The first explosion lit up the bridge of the Blood Talon like a miniature sun. General Vax spun toward the tactical display, his reptilian reflexes bringing him to full alertness in seconds. "Report," he roared. "Unknown contact attacking the Fang Breaker." Major Krell called out, his claws dancing over the sensor controls. "Ship destroyed. No survivors. Where is the enemy? Show me on the main screen." The display showed empty space where the heavy cruiser had been moments before. Debris scattered in all directions, glowing metal fragments spinning away into the void. But the sensors showed nothing else. No enemy ships. No weapon signatures, nothing. "Sensor sweep," Vax ordered. "Full spectrum. Find them." Before anyone could respond, another explosion erupted near the fleet's edge. The destroyer Night Hunter simply vanished, torn apart by weapons that seemed to fire from nowhere. "Contact bearing 047, called the sensor operator. "No, wait! Contact lost. Sir, I cannot get a lock on whatever is attacking us." Vax felt something he had not experienced in decades. Confusion. In 40 years of military service, he had never faced an enemy that could attack while remaining completely invisible. Stealth technology existed, but nothing this advanced. A third ship died, then a fourth. All vessels, evasive maneuvers, Vax commanded. Deploy countermeasures. Activate all defensive systems. The Krex fleet began to move, their ships spreading out in defensive formations that had served them well in countless battles. Energy shields flickered to life. Point defense systems came online. Sensor arrays swept space with increasing intensity. It made no difference. The attacks continued with surgical precision. Each strike hit exactly where it would cause maximum damage. Engine compartments exploded. Weapon systems went dark. Command bridges disappeared in balls of fire. "Sir," Major Krell reported, "we have lost 6 ships in 4 minutes. Whatever is attacking us, our sensors cannot track it." Vax studied the tactical display with growing unease. The pattern of attack suggested multiple small vessels rather than a single large ship. But how could anything remain hidden from Krex military sensors? "Launch fighters," he ordered. "If we cannot find them with sensors, we will find them with eyes." Squadrons of Krex fighter craft poured from the fleet's carriers, their pilots eager for battle. The small ships spread out in search patterns, their sensors probing every cubic meter of space around the fleet. For a moment, Vax thought the strategy might work. Then the fighters began dying too. "Fighter Squadron 7 is under attack," the communications officer reported. "They report enemy contacts but cannot maintain visual or sensor lock." On the communication channels, Vax could hear the panicked voices of his pilots. They were seeing something out there, something fast and deadly, but every time they tried to engage, their targets simply vanished. Then the sky below began to burn. "Sir," the sensor operator's voice cracked with stress. "Multiple contacts entering the atmosphere. Whatever was attacking us in orbit is now heading for the planet." The main screen switched to show Kepler 442c from orbit. Hundreds of bright streaks were falling through the atmosphere like meteors, but these meteors were moving with purpose. They curved and twisted as they fell, avoiding the few remaining Krex defensive positions. "Invasion pods," Major Krell identified. "But from what ships? We never detected any troop transports." Vax watched the display with growing dread. Each streak of light represented enemy soldiers, heading for his carefully organized occupation zones. Whoever was attacking had managed to get troops past his fleet without being detected. The first pods began striking the surface. Instead of the large, obvious landing zones that most species used for planetary assault, these pods were scattered across dozens of locations, each one small enough to avoid concentrated fire, but together representing a massive invasion force. "Contact Captain Zess on the surface," Vax ordered. "I want a full report on these landing forces." The communication took several minutes to establish. When Captain Zess finally appeared on screen, his usually composed demeanor was shattered. Behind him, explosions lit the night sky. "General, we are under attack by unknown forces. The enemy appears to be using some kind of advanced stealth technology. Our sensors cannot track them effectively." "How many enemy soldiers?" "Unknown, sir." The landing was scattered across the entire hemisphere. Preliminary estimates suggest thousands, possibly tens of thousands. Vax felt his confidence beginning to crack. "What species?" "Altarian commandos." "Cooperative special forces?" Captain Zess paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a note of confusion that Vax had never heard before. "Sir, preliminary reports suggest they are human." "Humans?" Vax stared at the screen. "Impossible. Human forces are engaged on the primary front. Intelligence confirms their entire fleet is fighting near the galactic core." "Yes, sir, but the prisoners we captured are reporting that the attacking forces are definitely human. They match all the physical descriptions in our databases." Before Vax could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the ship. More explosions bloomed in space as the invisible attackers continued their assault on his fleet. "Sir," Major Krell called out, "we are receiving a transmission on all frequencies." "Put it through." The main screen flickered, showing the interior of what appeared to be a military command center. A human female in dark combat uniform looked directly into the camera. Her face was hard, professional, and completely without fear. "General Vax of the Krex Fifth Fleet," she said in accented but clear galactic standard. "I am Colonel Sarah Chen of the 1st Human Expeditionary Force. You have 2 minutes to begin withdrawing your forces from this planet. Any Krex forces remaining on the surface after that time will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Vax found his voice. You are bluffing, human. My fleet controls this system. You have no ships large enough to threaten us. The human's expression did not change. General, you have lost 8 ships in the last 10 minutes. Your orbital superiority no longer exists. My ground forces are already engaging your occupation troops. This is not a negotiation. This is a warning. What authority do you claim here? This world belongs to the Krex Empire by right of conquest. The authority of someone who gives a damn, the human replied coldly. 1 minute and 30 seconds. The transmission ended. Vax stared at the blank screen, his mind racing. Everything about this situation defied logic. Humans were known to be aggressive by cooperative standards, but they followed military protocols. They used conventional tactics. They announced their presence and demanded formal surrender. They did not appear from nowhere and destroy fleets with invisible weapons. Sir, the communications officer reported, I am receiving scattered reports from ground forces. They report human soldiers attacking in small groups, extremely well coordinated, using weapons and tactics that do not match our intelligence files. On the tactical display, red icons began appearing across the planet's surface. Each one represented a Krex position under attack. The pattern was spreading rapidly as human forces struck with precision that should have been impossible. How did they get here? Vax demanded. Where are their ships? Major Krell was studying the sensor logs from the past hour. Sir, I believe they were here before we arrived. The stealth technology they are using is beyond anything in our databases. They could have been sitting in this system for days without our knowledge. The implication hit Vax like a physical blow. If the humans had been waiting in ambush, if they had planned this entire operation in advance, then everything he thought he knew about the tactical situation was wrong. Sir, the sensor operator called out, the attacks on our fleet have stopped. I am reading massive electromagnetic signatures from the enemy positions. It appears they are jamming our communications with the surface. Vax looked at the tactical display with new understanding. The orbital bombardment had been Phase 1, designed to cripple his fleet and establish space superiority. The ground assault was Phase 2, designed to eliminate his occupation forces and rescue the captured population. This was not a desperate rescue mission. This was a carefully planned military operation executed by forces that had been studying Krex tactics and preparing specific countermeasures. General, Major Krell said quietly, what are your orders? Vax stared at the display showing his burning fleet and his embattled ground forces. In 40 years of military service, he had never faced an enemy like this. The humans were not fighting like prey species trying to escape. They were fighting like predators defending their territory. For the first time in his career, General Vax of the Krex 5th Fleet was not sure he would win. On the planet below, thunder continued to roll across the night sky as human forces engaged his troops in battles that his sensors could barely detect. Each flash of light represented another piece of his carefully planned conquest falling apart. The prey had found guardians, and the guardians were very, very angry. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos kicked open her drop pod with a force that sent the armored door flying 20 meters across the Zalani Plaza. She rolled out in a smooth motion, her rifle already sweeping for targets while her tactical display painted the surrounding area with information. 30 seconds to full deployment. Enemy positions marked in red. Friendly civilians showing as blue dots in her helmet display. Mission parameters clear. Eliminate Krex forces. Secure civilians. Establish defensive perimeter. Simple work. Around her, 47 other pods cracked open with military precision. 2nd Platoon, Alpha Company, 1st Human Expeditionary Force deployed into combat formation without a word being spoken. They moved like they had trained together for years because they had. The Krex had made a mistake. They thought conquering helpless civilians made them warriors. They were about to learn the difference between slaughter and warfare. Contact front, Corporal Jackson called out, his voice calm in Santos's earpiece. 6 Krex soldiers, 200 meters. They looked confused. Santos could see them through her scope. Tall reptilian figures in dark armor, their weapons pointed in random directions as they tried to understand what was happening. They had been expecting broken civilians, not armed humans dropping from the sky. Rodriguez, Myers flank left. Jackson, Morrison take the right. Harris, you are with me up the middle. Standard engagement protocol. The human squad moved like water flowing around obstacles. They used cover that the Kreks had never noticed, advanced through angles that military doctrine said were impossible, and coordinated their fire with a precision that came from shared understanding. The Kreks never had a chance. The firefight lasted exactly 18 seconds. When it ended, 6 Krek soldiers were dead and the humans had not taken a single casualty. Santos barely paused to check their gear before moving to the next objective. Command, this is Santos. Landing zone secured. Moving to primary target, copy Santos. Intelligence reports approximately 300 civilians in the processing center, 2 clicks north of your position. Estimated 50 Kreks guards. Understood. Moving to engage. As they advanced through the damaged Bio City, Santos noticed movement in the shadows. Zilani civilians watching the humans with expressions of wonder and terror. Most had never seen any species fight back against the Kreks, much less win. The processing center had been set up in what was once a beautiful cultural hall. Now it was surrounded by guard towers and razor wire, with Krek soldiers patrolling the perimeter. Santos could see the Zilani prisoners inside through her scope. Families huddled together, their large eyes reflecting fear and hopelessness. That was about to change. Myers, Rodriguez, take out the guard towers. Silent kills only. Jackson, Morrison, secure the north entrance. Harris, you are with me on the main assault. Santos checked her gear one more time. Rifle loaded with armor-piercing rounds. Grenades primed for maximum effect. Combat knife sharp enough to cut through Krek's hide. Everything she needed to remind these lizards why humans had earned their reputation in the war. The attack began at exactly 0347 local time. Myers and Rodriguez eliminated the tower guards with precision sniper fire, their silenced weapons making no more sound than whispered prayers. Jackson and Morrison moved to cut off the north exit, while Santos and Harris approached the main entrance. The first Kreks guard noticed them when Santos was 30 meters away. He opened his mouth to shout a warning and found himself looking down the barrel of a human assault rifle instead. Santos put 3 rounds center mass and moved on without breaking stride. The alarm started wailing as human forces breached the compound from multiple directions. The Kreks guards responded exactly as their training dictated. They formed defensive positions and tried to call for reinforcements. It was the wrong response against human tactics. Santos lobbed a grenade over the Kreks barricade, not to kill but to scatter. As the reptilian soldiers dove for cover, Harris flanked around their left side while Jackson and Morrison hit them from the north. The Kreks found themselves caught in a crossfire with no safe position to retreat to. Human military doctrine was simple: apply overwhelming force at the point of contact while maintaining tactical mobility. Never fight fair when you could fight smart. Never give the enemy time to adapt. The Kreks were stronger individually, but humans fought as a unit. Each soldier knew exactly where their teammates were and what they were doing. They moved like parts of a single organism, each action supporting the whole. 15 minutes after the assault began, 50 Kreks guards were dead, and the processing center was secure. The humans had taken minor wounds but no casualties. Santos stood in the main hall watching her medic treat a wounded Zilani civilian. The alien's large eyes focused on her with something approaching worship. "Are you real?" the Zilani whispered in broken galactic standard. "Real enough," Santos replied. "Can you walk? We need to get you and your people to safety." As her squad organized the evacuation, Santos received reports from other units across the planet. The pattern was the same everywhere: human forces striking with surgical precision, eliminating Kreks positions faster than the enemy could respond. The Kreks had expected another easy conquest. Instead, they were fighting the one species in the galaxy that actually enjoyed warfare. Elder Thys emerged from the crowd of rescued civilians, his gray fur matted with blood from minor wounds. He approached Santos with careful steps, his head tilted in the Zilani gesture of respect. "You came," he said simply. "Yes." "Why?" "We have nothing to offer. No resources worth fighting for. No strategic value." Santos looked at the elder Zilani for a long moment. Around them, human soldiers were distributing medical supplies and organizing defensive positions. Professional, efficient, deadly. "Because you needed help," she said finally. "That is enough." The radio crackled in her ear. "Santos, this is command. We have a situation developing in the capital. General Vax has taken hostages and is threatening to execute them if we do not withdraw." Santos felt her jaw tighten. She had read the intelligence files on General Vax. The Krex commander was known for using civilian shields when his tactical situation became desperate. "What are your orders?" she asked. "Negative engagement. I repeat, do not engage. We cannot risk civilian casualties." Santos looked around at the Zalani civilians her squad had just rescued. Children clung to their parents. Elderly aliens sat in shock, barely able to believe they were free. These people had suffered enough. "Command, this is Santos. Request permission to speak with Elder Thys." Permission granted. Santos activated her external speakers so the Zalani leader could hear both sides of the conversation. "Elder Thys, you heard the situation. General Vax has taken your people hostage and is demanding we withdraw. If we pull back, he will execute the prisoners anyway and continue the occupation. If we attack, some hostages may die in the crossfire." The elder alien closed his large eyes for a moment. When he opened them, Santos saw something she had not expected. Resolve. "Sergeant Santos, your people came here knowing they might die to save strangers. You have shown us what courage looks like. We cannot ask you to abandon others to save ourselves. Are you certain? This is not a decision I can make for your people." Elder Thys turned to address the crowd of rescued Zalani. He spoke in their own language, his voice carrying across the hall. When he finished, the response was immediate and unanimous. Santos did not need a translator to understand their answer. "Command, this is Santos. The civilians request that we proceed with the assault. They understand the risks." A long pause. Then, "Copy, Santos. You have a go. All units converge on the capital." "Time to finish this." Santos turned to her squad. "You heard the orders. Lock and load. We have lizards to kill." The final assault began 20 minutes later. Human forces converged on the capital from 6 different directions, their movements coordinated by satellite communication and battlefield AI. They moved through the bio-city like ghosts, using every piece of cover and every tactical advantage their training had given them. The Krex had thought they understood warfare. They had conquered 17 worlds using the same tactics, overwhelming force applied against helpless populations. But they had never fought humans. As Santos led her squad through the darkened streets, she reflected on what made humans different. Other species fought for territory or resources or survival. Humans were the only ones who fought for principles. The Krex were about to learn why that mattered. In the distance, the sound of gunfire echoed through the night as human soldiers closed in on their final objective. Each shot was precise, professional, and absolutely without mercy. The prey had found their protectors, and the protectors were very good at their job. General Vax stood in the shattered remains of the council chamber, his back pressed against the wall as human weapons fire echoed through the bio-city outside. Through the broken windows, he could see the flashes of combat lighting up the night sky. His carefully planned occupation was collapsing around him like a house of cards. 50 Zalani prisoners knelt in the center of the room, their hands bound behind their backs. Elder Thys was among them, his gray fur matted with blood but his large eyes still defiant. Around the perimeter, the last 12 members of Vax's personal guard held their weapons ready. It should have been enough. No military force would risk civilian casualties on this scale. The humans would have to withdraw or watch their precious allies die. It should have been enough, but the gunfire kept getting closer. "Sir," Captain Zest reported from his position by the window. "Human forces have breached the outer perimeter. They are advancing on all fronts. How many? Unknown. They move like ghosts. Our sensors cannot track them effectively." Vax snarled in frustration. In 40 years of military service, he had never faced an enemy like these humans. They fought with a coordination and precision that defied explanation. Worse, they seemed to actually enjoy combat. His communication device crackled to life. "General Vax, this is Colonel Chen. I believe you wanted to speak with us." Vax activated the transmitter. "Colonel, I trust you can see the tactical situation. I have 50 of your precious allies here with me. Any attempt to assault this position will result in their immediate execution." "I can see them, General. Elder Thys appears to be among your prisoners." "Indeed. The leader of these pathetic creatures. I assume you would prefer to keep him alive?" A pause. Then, "General, I am going to put you in direct communication with Elder Thys. I think you should hear what he has to say." The transmission shifted. Suddenly, Vax could hear the Elder Zalani's voice. calm despite his circumstances. "Colonel Chen, thank you for allowing me to speak. General Vax, I have a message for you." "Speak," Vax commanded. "You came to our world believing that strength meant the ability to hurt others. You enslaved my people because you could. You killed our children because it amused you." Elder Thiss's voice grew stronger as he spoke. "But you made a mistake, General. You assumed that because we could not defend ourselves, no one would defend us. You thought the galaxy had abandoned us. The galaxy did abandon you," Vax replied harshly. "Your precious galactic cooperative fled when real warriors arrived." "Yes," Thiss agreed. "The cooperative abandoned us, but these humans did not." The communication channel shifted again. Colonel Chen's voice returned, colder than the void between stars. "General Vax, Elder Thiss has made his position clear. We have authorization to proceed. You are bluffing. No civilized species would risk so many civilian casualties. General, you keep making the same mistake. You assume we fight like other species. We do not." Before Vax could respond, the windows of the council chamber exploded inward. Smoke grenades filled the room with thick gray clouds. Emergency lighting flickered and died. In the sudden darkness, chaos erupted. The human assault came from 6 directions simultaneously. They breached the walls, the ceiling, and even came up through the floor using routes that should not have existed. Vax heard his guards firing wildly into the smoke. Their shots answered by the precise crack of human weapons. Through his helmet's thermal imaging, Vax could see human soldiers moving through the chaos like deadly spirits. They knew exactly where each Krex was positioned, exactly where each Zilani prisoner knelt. Their movements were so coordinated they seemed to share a single mind. The firefight lasted exactly 43 seconds. When the smoke cleared, all 12 of Vax's guards were dead. The human soldiers stood among the kneeling Zilani prisoners, cutting their bonds with careful precision. Not a single civilian had been harmed. Vax himself was on his knees, his weapon torn from his grasp, his armor cracked by precise rifle fire. Blood seeped from wounds that hurt but would not kill. The humans had taken him alive deliberately. Staff Sergeant Santos approached him, her rifle still smoking from recent use. Her face was invisible behind her combat helmet, but her voice carried the authority of victory. "General Vax of the Krex 5th Fleet," she said formally. "You are hereby under arrest for war crimes against civilian populations. You have the right to remain silent, though I doubt you will use it." Vax looked around the chamber at his dead guards, at the freed prisoners, at the human soldiers who had accomplished the impossible. "How?" he whispered. Santos removed her helmet, revealing a face that was young, professional, and completely without mercy. "We spent 3 years studying your tactics, General. We knew exactly how you would respond to every situation. We knew you would take hostages when your position became desperate. But the casualties, you risked killing innocent civilians." "We risked nothing," Santos replied coldly. "Every human in this operation trained for 6 months specifically for this mission. We knew the layout of this building better than you did. We knew where every prisoner would be positioned. We knew where each of your guards would take cover." Santos gestured to her squad. "These soldiers can put a bullet through a target the size of a coin from 300 meters while running at full speed. They can breach a wall and identify friend from foe in complete darkness. They can coordinate complex assaults while under heavy fire." She looked down at the defeated Krex general. "You thought taking hostages would protect you because that is how other species think. But humans do not abandon people who need help. We find a way to save them." Elder Thiss approached slowly, his large eyes focused on Santos with something approaching wonder. "How many of your people died in this rescue?" "None," Santos replied. "We lost some equipment, a few minor injuries, no casualties. But this entire operation, the orbital battle, the planetary assault, it must have cost thousands of lives." Santos shook her head. "Total human casualties for this operation: 0 dead, 17 wounded. We came here to save lives, Elder Thiss. That includes our own." Vax stared at the human in disbelief. "Impossible. My fleet destroyed at least 8 ships. Your fleet destroyed 8 unmanned decoy drones. Our actual ships were never in weapons range." The full scope of his defeat hit Vax like a physical blow. The humans had not just outfought him, they had outsmarted him at every level. They had anticipated his tactics, countered his strategy, and achieved complete victory without suffering meaningful losses. It was the most thorough defeat in Krex military history. Outside the council chamber, the sounds of combat had faded to silence. Human soldiers moved through the bio-city, securing areas and organizing medical aid for the liberated Zelani. Overhead, human ships that had somehow remained hidden throughout the battle began landing to assist with evacuation of the wounded. Elder Thys walked to the shattered window and looked out over his damaged city. Fires still burned in some areas, but Zelani civilians were emerging from hiding places to see their rescuers. Children who had spent days in underground shelters would soon see sunlight again. "Colonel Chen," he said into his communicator, "I must ask the question that has been troubling me. Why did humans come here? What do you gain from this?" The colonel's voice carried across the chamber. "Elder Thys, 3 days ago we received your final transmission. The one where you said the galaxy had abandoned you to die. Our government decided that was unacceptable. But we have nothing to offer in return. No strategic resources, no military value." "You are wrong," Santos interjected. "You have something more valuable than resources or territory." "What?" "You needed help," Santos said simply. "That is all the reason humans require." As the human soldiers began organizing the evacuation of prisoners and the securing of the city, Vax found himself studying these strange beings who had defeated his army. They moved with military precision, but they showed gentle care for the civilians they had rescued. They were deadly warriors who chose to be protectors. In 40 years of conquest, he had never encountered anything like them. Hours later, as Vax was being transferred to a prison transport, Elder Thys approached him one final time. "General, you came here believing that strength meant the ability to take what you wanted. You conquered us because you could." Vax said nothing. "But you were wrong about strength," Thys continued. "True strength is not the power to destroy. True strength is the choice to protect others when you gain nothing from it." Elder Thys looked up at the human soldiers organizing the evacuation. These beings came across half the galaxy to save people they had never met. They risked their lives for strangers who could offer them nothing in return. He turned back to Vax. "That is what real strength looks like." As the transport lifted off, carrying him toward a prison that would hold him for the rest of his life, General Vax looked down at the planet he had tried to conquer. Human ships filled the sky, bringing medical supplies and aid workers. The biocities would be rebuilt. The Zelani would be free. For the first time in his career, Vax had encountered a species that fought not because they had to, but because they chose to. And now he understood why the humans were winning the war. In his final log entry as a free being, Elder Thys wrote, "We believed no one would fight for us until human infantry fell from the sky.